You have been working on something. For a while now, consistently, with genuine effort, you show up, you do the practice, you put in the hours. And when you look in the mirror, when you measure where you are against where you want to be, the gap looks about the same as it did when you started. You cannot see the difference. This is the specific frustration of the person who is growing but cannot feel it. Who is changing in ways that are real but not yet visible? Who is accumulating something, knowledge, capability, understanding, skill that has not yet crossed the threshold where it becomes undeniable? Korean wisdom has 4 characters for exactly this moment. 일취월장, 일취월장, day by day advancing, month by month growing. Welcome back to K-Wisdom, where 4 characters hold thousands of years of Korean wisdom. Today 일취월장, and the king who understood something 3,000 years ago that most people still haven't. Let's start with the 4 characters. Re-il, day, the daily unit, the small increment, ju shui, to advance, to achieve, to move toward, to arrive at, yu-wal, month, the larger unit, the accumulated days, jang, to grow, to develop, to move forward, to become more, ri-ju-yu-jang, day by day advancing, month by month growing, 4 characters, 2 time scales, and the specific, patient, entirely reliable description of what consistent effort produces, not in a single dramatic moment, but in the accumulation of days that become months that become the person you are becoming. The story behind 일취월장 begins in the Zhou dynasty about 3,000 years ago. The second king of Zhou was Sungwang King Chengwang. He came to the throne young. His ministers, concerned about a young ruler's inexperience, offered him counsel, words of guidance and caution about how to govern well. And then the young king responded. Not with defensiveness, not with a performance of confidence he didn't have. With something rarer and more powerful. Honesty. He said in the poem that became part of the Shijing, the book of songs, something that a ruler admitting to his ministers 3,000 years ago is still remarkable today. I am small and not very capable. I am not naturally brilliant or graceful in conduct. A king, saying this, to his ministers, and then the 4 characters that followed. The young king said, I am small and not very capable. I am not naturally brilliant. I am not naturally graceful or elegant in conduct. He paused, but ri-ju-yu-jang, day by day I will advance. Month by month I will grow. I will gather learning until it reaches brightness. This is the origin of 일취월장. Not a description of someone who is already excellent. A commitment made by someone who knows they are not. The king was not performing modesty as a political gesture. He was making a specific, practical claim about how he intended to become adequate to the enormous task he had been given. Not through natural brilliance, he had admitted he didn't have that. Not through pretending the gap didn't exist. Through 일취월장, through showing up every day. Through the accumulation of small advances that become, month by month, growth that is real. 3,000 years ago, still true today, 일취월장 describes something that is genuinely difficult to see while it is happening. Each day's advance is small. Invisibly small. If you measure today against yesterday, you cannot see the difference. The skill is almost exactly the same. The understanding is marginally clearer. The capability has moved by an amount too small to register. This is why people stop. Not because the growth isn't happening. Because they cannot see it happening. Because the feedback is too slow, the increment too small, the gap between where they are and where they want to be too large to feel like it is closing. 일취월장 doesn't promise rapid transformation. It promises something more reliable and less exciting. Ri-ju, every day, some small advance. Yu-jang, every month, the small advances accumulate into growth that is real. The person who can hold both time scales at once, who can do today's small work while trusting the monthly accumulation, is the person 일취월장 is describing. King Chengwang's admission contains something that takes time to understand. Admitting you are not naturally brilliant is not a disadvantage. It is a clarification of what kind of growth you are going to rely on. The person who believes they are naturally brilliant tends to rely on their brilliance. They use what they have. They are impressive in the moments where their natural capability is sufficient. But natural capability has a ceiling that consistent daily effort does not. The person who knows they are not naturally brilliant, who has accepted that their growth must come from accumulation rather than talent, has no choice but 일취월장. Every day, without exception, not because they feel like it, because it is the only path available to them. And this path, followed consistently, tends to produce results that natural brilliance alone cannot reach. Because brilliance is a starting point. 일취월장 is a direction, and direction, maintained long enough, goes further than starting point. 일취월장 comes from the Shijing Sigyong in Korean, the Book of Songs. The Shijing is one of the oldest collections of poetry in all of human history. Compiled around 600 BCE, though containing poems from centuries earlier, it gathered over 300 songs from across the Zhou dynasty. Folk songs, court songs, ceremonial hymns, the full range of what people were singing and saying about their lives. Confucius is said to have edited the collection. He considered it essential, the first thing young scholars should read, the foundation of moral and aesthetic education. And embedded in it, in a ceremonial hymn called Zhangji, reverence is the moment where a young king admitted his limitations and made his commitment. Riju Zhang Shui Ji Shi Guang Ming. Day by day advancing, month by month growing, learning will reach brightness. 3,000 years of people reading this. 3,000 years of it being true. Il취월장 is alive in every corner of modern life, where consistent daily effort produces growth that is invisible in the moment but undeniable over time. The language learner who practices every day and cannot feel the improvement until the day a conversation happens that 6 months ago was impossible. Not because something dramatic occurred. Because 6 months of daily practice accumulated into capability that wasn't there before. The musician who practices scales that sound almost identical to them each session until they listen to recordings from 6 months apart and find it impossible to believe they're the same person playing. The person developing a skill at work code, writing, analysis, leadership who cannot see their own growth until a colleague mentions that they seem completely different from when they started. All of them il취월장 in progress. Riju. Every day, invisible. Zhang. Every month, undeniable. The hardest day of il취월장 is not the first day. The first day has its own energy. You begin with intention, with the specific motivation of someone choosing to start something. The hardest day is the day in the middle, somewhere between the beginning and the point where the accumulation becomes visible, when the practice feels exactly the same as it did last week. When you cannot locate any evidence that you are different from the person who started this. When the gap between where you are and where you want to be seems exactly as large as it has always been. On that day, il취월장 is not a feeling. It is not something you experience. It is a fact about how accumulation works. Today's practice is adding to yesterday's practice. The increment is too small to feel. The accumulation is happening anyway. Riju. Today's small advance. Even when you cannot feel it. Zhang. The month's growth. Even when you cannot see it yet. The king who admitted he was not naturally brilliant showed up anyway. That is il취월장. Il취월장 contains a practical instruction about comparison that changes everything. The wrong comparison, where I am today versus where I want to be. This comparison produces discouragement. The gap is large. Progress is not visible at the daily scale. The destination seems permanently far away. The right comparison, where I am today versus where I was a month ago. This comparison, the Zhang comparison, the monthly accumulation, produces something different. Because a month is long enough for il취월장 to have produced real change. Not the change you want. Real change. The language learner who compares today's conversation to last month's conversation finds undeniable progress. The musician who compares this month's recording to last month's finds someone who is genuinely different. The practitioner of anything who compares monthly rather than daily, or who compares to the beginning rather than the destination, finds evidence that the accumulation is real. Il취월장. The right time scale makes the invisible visible. King Chengwang's reign is remembered as one of the most stable and prosperous periods of the Zhou dynasty. Not because he turned out to be naturally brilliant after all, but because he governed the way he said he would govern. Riju Zhang. Day by day advancing, month by month growing. He showed up. He learned from his ministers. He accumulated the understanding and capability that governing well requires, not because he started with it, but because he committed to the daily work of developing it. The young king who admitted he was small and not very capable became, over the accumulation of days and months and years of daily effort, the ruler who presided over what later generations called the rule of Cheng and Kong, a golden era in Zhou history. Il취월장. Not talent, not brilliance, not natural capability. The daily accumulation, the monthly growth, shown up for, every day, for long enough. Il취월장 is not about speed. The daily increment is small by design. Riju. Each day's advance is not meant to be dramatic. It is meant to be consistent. The person who tries to advance dramatically every day, who pushes for large leaps rather than small consistent steps, often cannot maintain the pace. The effort is too large to repeat every day. The inevitable bad days feel like failures rather than simply days. Il취월장 asks for something more sustainable. The small advance that can be made every day, including the bad ones. The practice that can be done when motivation is low, when progress feels invisible, when the gap between here and there seems too large to close. Because the small daily advance, made every day, compounds. Not dramatically, not visibly day to day, but month by month, the person who made the small daily advance is genuinely somewhere different from the person who waited for the right conditions to make a large one. 일취월장, small, daily, compounding. King Chengwang's verse from the Shijing continued beyond 일취월장.日就月將 shui yu ji shi yu guang ming. Day by day advancing, month by month growing learning will reach brightness. Guang ming, brightness, illumination, the state of understanding that accumulated learning eventually produces. Not immediately, not visibly, not in any given day's practice, but in the accumulation of days. In the yuzhang, the monthly growth. In the patient, consistent, unglamorous daily work of someone who knows they are not naturally brilliant and has chosen to grow anyway. 일취월장 does not promise you will arrive quickly. It promises you will arrive. The daily increment is small. The monthly accumulation is real. The eventual brightness Guangming is what consistent learning produces when given enough time. 3,000 years ago, a king said this to his ministers. It is still the most honest description of how genuine growth works. 일취월장 asks you to look honestly at your daily practice. Not the dramatic version, the practice on the good days, the sessions where you can feel yourself improving, the moments where the work feels worthy of the goal. The ordinary version, the Tuesday that looks exactly like last Tuesday. The practice that feels the same as it did last week. The work that is producing accumulation you cannot yet measure. Is it happening? Are you doing the day's small advance even when you cannot feel it happening? Even when the gap between where you are and where you want to be seems not to have changed. King Chengwang admitted he was not naturally brilliant, and then made his commitment, and showed up for it. Not because he could see his growth every day, because he understood how accumulation works. Riju, today's advance, small, invisible, real. Yuzhang, this month's growth, accumulated, undeniable, building toward brightness. 일취월장, that is 일취월장, day by day advancing, month by month growing. Born 3,000 years ago in the words of a young king who admitted he was not naturally brilliant and committed to daily growth anyway. Preserved in the Shijing, one of the oldest collections of poetry in human history. Used today whenever someone needs to be reminded that the invisible daily increment is real and the monthly accumulation is undeniable. It is not an exciting promise. It is not the promise of sudden transformation or dramatic breakthrough. It is the honest description of how consistent effort actually works. Small, every day, real, every month, bright, eventually. So here are your questions for today. What are you practicing that you cannot yet see changing you? And have you compared yourself this month to yourself last month? Not to where you want to be. To where you were. Is the accumulation real? Tell us in the comments. Because 일취월장 stories, the ones about the invisible daily practice that became undeniable monthly growth, are some of the most important ones we have. Thank you for watching K-Wisdom, where 4 characters hold thousands of years of Korean wisdom. If this stayed with you, if you are thinking about your daily increment right now, please like and subscribe. There are many more 4 characters waiting. See you next time on K-Wisdom.